Okay, it looks like we might be live, so I'm just going to click out of here so we don't get lots of notifications, and won't be a second here. Okay, hold on a sec. Oh, this is the most faffy part of the whole thing, just trying to make sure that you haven't got clicks, notifications coming from everywhere. Okay. Leave that. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming and having a chat with us tonight. I just want to introduce you, and then you can tell us a little bit about yourself. So and also I'll tell you what we're doing tonight. We're just running this little chat through the 30+ community. So we're just a bunch of collectively in all the groups, there's about 45,000 New Zealand, mainly New Zealand women, and other areas, Australia and some other countries, but collectively about 45,000 women in the 30+ age group, and with some pretty diverse thoughts and feelings and opinions. And we decided to run a bit of a political series coming up to the elections, just to talk about some of those key things that we feel like are happening and maybe we're not seeing enough of. We're not seeing them covered as well as we might like to in the media. So we're just trying to draw on some of those topics and just sort of expand them a little bit more and give them a little bit more airway. So welcome Susan Hemming from Bristol Grove Dairies. That's how we say it, eh? So thanks so much for coming along. So tell me about yourself and your farm and that sort of thing, and then we'll get chit-chatting.
Yeah, so thank you for having me, Natalia. So my husband and I, we farm on on a dairy farm just outside of Invercargill, way down here in Southland, where it is freezing today. It's absolutely horrible out there today, but it is what it is. So my husband's family's been on this farm for nearly 150 years. So we've been here for about 148 years. And when they first came here, they started off chiseling out an existence effectively, mixed farming, and then they were dairy farming for quite a number of years. And then during the wool boom of the 50s and 60s, they changed over to sheep. And then we converted the farm back to dairy in 2007. With the premise, I suppose, with the thought of that we were going to be the opposite of the Dirty Dairy campaign, which was rife at the time. We were like, okay, well, let's see if we can do this really, really well. So we bought appropriate animals for the type of land and soil that we have. We all grass, no palm kernel, no inputs outside of that. We have stocking rate. So when we talk about stocking rate, that's the number of animals per hectare. And our stocking rate is about 2.8, so 2.8 cows per hectare, which is quite a low stocking rate.
Yeah.
Tell me if I'm getting too technical.
No, all good so far.
Yeah, so tell me if I'm getting technical. So yeah, low stocking rate, all grass, free range, etc., just trying to do a really good job, basically.
Yeah.
But also have a profitable business as well, because we support our own household. My husband and I, we have 3 daughters. We support our own household. We support his parents. And there are another 2 couples that work or that live off this farm. So we provide jobs for them and housing and a life, I guess, for them as well. And they work with us, and we appreciate them absolutely. We couldn't do it without them, sort of thing. We milk 650 roughly crossbred cows. So that's Frisian Jersey cross. So they're absolutely so cute. They're really gorgeous little things.
I've seen the photos, the videos.
Sorry?
I've seen the videos of them being waxed and all sorts.
No, clipped.
Clipped and waxed.
We clipped them.
Oh, not Brazilians then.
No. No, we do a lot. There's a lot more involved in dairy farming than people sort of realize. As you saw earlier in the videos that I shared with you, they get pedicures and they get clipped around their tails and we make the book all pretty and stuff, but it's for their own comfort. Basically, it's to make them more comfortable. It's all about making the cow comfortable. If the cow's not comfortable, she's not going to do what we need her to do. So if she's upset, or if she's being mistreated, or if she's, if there's something not right in her world, it affects our world. Wow. So the happier we can have them, the better we can feed them, the better for the environment that we can be for them, which kind of sounds kind of opposite of what you've been hearing in the media. But the more we can look after them and their environment, the better those animals will perform. Because we don't want to be putting them, we don't want to be giving them drugs, and we don't want to be giving them hormones. We don't want to do anything. We want that cow to be really content in an environment that we create for them. And that's kind of
thing. So is that the reason why there are hormones added and different things to the feed? It's when the cows aren't performing properly, and they're not performing because they're not happy.
In New Zealand, we don't add hormones to the feed. So in dairy, I mean, I can't speak for other industries, but in dairy, we don't put hormones in their feed. We don't use hormones at all for growth purposes, because it's illegal in this country.
Yeah.
So as far as your beef is concerned, there is no hormones in your beef. No added hormones to your beef. There's hormones in everybody. You have hormones. I have hormones. There's naturally occurring hormones. And in dairying, what would you say? There are hormones that are naturally occurring in the cow, which we are able to trigger or not trigger to help manage that animal. For example, during our mating season, if there's not a lot of feed on a particular block of land, what you do is you try to condense that mating down. So you would introduce via a veterinarian, or with consultation with a veterinarian, you would introduce a hormone in called prostaglandin, which naturally occurs in the animal. So this is a naturally occurring substance to condense the mating period, right? So that you have enough feed for that period to help the animals do what they need to do. Again, making sure that they're happy, making sure that it's not something that they're not happy with. Yeah. Like I said, it's a lot more involved and complicated than sort of people realize.
It totally is. Even just this first 5 minutes, I'm like,
and I'm really, really passionate about farming. So I do tend to ramble on a bit, and I do tend to probably dive in way deeper than I should. But at the end of the day, what you guys need to be aware of is that New Zealand farmers, we are so heavily restricted in everything. So all of if we have a sick animal, all of those drugs effectively that we use to treat that animal has to be it has to be okayed by a veterinarian. So every year we have a big sit down with our veterinarian. They go over everything with us, make sure that everything is on the table. We have to record everything, and it's recorded in triplicate just about. So Empire Aware, Fonterra, well, we supply our milk to Fonterra. Like, there's a whole lot of paperwork and stuff that's involved in it. We're not just we don't just stick things into them willy-nilly just for the sake of it. And as you said before, if the cow is happy and healthy, you don't usually need to do anything. Saying that, in any population, you think of a group of 650 people, somebody is going to have the flu or a cold, or, there's going to be something sometimes that occurs. And when that happens, we need to be able to look after those animals in an appropriate fashion.
Man. And so do you consider, I mean, it's amazing. I'm blown away already. So do you consider yourself to have lovely, happy animals in your farm?
You tell me. You've seen some of our videos. I mean, we're an open book. So our farm, we have a Facebook page. We post what we do.
Love your video
stuff. It's interesting because a lot of people and I mean, happy is a word that I use, and I really shouldn't, because animals, well, dairy cows, they don't have human emotions. And when people are like, oh, she's crying for her baby, or she's sad, or she's this, or she's whatever, it's not kind of the same thing. Cows are pretty much concerned with eating, sleeping, pooing, and getting pregnant. That's pretty much
pretty fundamental. Some biological stuff going on there. Yep.
Yeah, it's kind of their mission in life. When they are happy, for lack of a better term, You can pick the way the animal behaves, which tells you her level of contentedness, I guess you could say. So if you see a cow in a paddock, she's laying down, chewing her cud, kind of eyes, just kind of, chilling out. She's content, she's ruminating, she's doing what she's supposed to be doing. She's behaving the way she's supposed to be behaving. I did a post a few years ago on something that I learned in New Zealand here, actually, something called happy lines. And I was like, what are you on about? And it's kind of a funny thing. So cows can't smile. They don't have facial expressions like we have. However, if you see a mob of cows when you're driving through the countryside and it's, say, a bright sunny day and it's, the sun shining and temperatures sort of about, 17, 18 degrees, and they're standing out there and they're eating grass, there's some very faint lines that go horizontally across the cow's ribs that look like someone's kind of brushed the hair with their fingers. And that's kind of a weird sort of a thing. And I noticed it one day, and I was with a Dairy NZ consulting officer, and she goes, "Oh my God, your cows are so happy." And I was like, "Okay." And she goes, yeah, they've got happy lines all over them. And I was like, "What are you on about?" So she said, "No, look, these are happy lines." And and apparently they just, and it's funny because once you see them, you can't unsee them. So but yeah, strongly suggest Google it. Happy lines in cows. It's a thing. And that's sort of the ultimate. That's how I gauge if my girls are content, if they've got the happy lines.
Oh, that's so nice. So you kind of have a feeling, and they have that look about them. I'm kind of visualizing that cat on Shrek, where its eyes go puffy and doe-eyed, like, oh, being all cute. And I'm kind of imagining the cows sort of fluffing up all of their happy lines and making themselves look all cute and lovable. So, okay, so you are very passionate about farming. It's obvious, and you obviously love your animals. And even if they can't be emotional, it sounds like you're quite emotional about them. So it sounds like you do a job that you really love. In fact, it sounds like it's more of a lifestyle than a job. Like you're really drawn in community. You've got, like you said, you've got your family members and extended people in the community that are living. It's a lifestyle for you all. Everybody has to live in. It's a lifestyle for you. Plus, it's got a long lineage. Almost 150 years, is it? So, I mean, it's huge. This is really a family affair, a community affair. So tell me, this is the thing that concerned me. So I saw a post that you put up, and obviously I didn't even know whether it was from a man or a woman, because it was Bristol Grove Dairies at first, and I was having a little read through, and then it was like, okay, this is definitely a farming wife, or I don't, because again, I'm completely naive about farming. You just don't, us urban, we don't know what we don't know. But I mean, what I did know is that, and I could connect with, was the deep grief involved in what's going on in farming for you at the moment. So, and obviously it stayed with me to the point that I felt like I needed to talk to you about it. What is going on in farming? What has the government stipulated or created as a law that has caused you so much grief? You can unpack that for me.
Well, this is kind of a long story. Sorry, I'll try to condense it as much as I can. So way back in 1995, the government at the time, I can't even remember who was in power. I think I only got here in 1996, but anyway, no, we were married in 96. That's right. Anyway, digress. So what happened was the current government at that time in 1995 created the National Policy Statement on Fresh Water, which is cool. Job done. That's sweet. You need a policy statement on fresh water. Over the course of successive governments, the rules surrounding that national policy statement, the resulting rules from the national policy statement on fresh water, have become tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter, which is, again, fine. We all want clean water. We do not want to be polluting the waterways. We do not want to have sediment runoff. We do not want to have nitrogen and phosphorus going into our waterways. So it's a case of, it's a scale, right? So New Zealanders need to ask themselves, do you want, and the current government, they said we want swimmable, we want to be able to swim in every waterway. I'm sorry, but 200 years ago, you couldn't swim in every waterway.
Well, yeah.
And as far as Fovo Strait is concerned, you really don't want to be swimming in there right now because it's freezing. But 200 years ago, before white man came to New Zealand, you could not swim in every waterway. There was bracken swamps. There were areas that had waterfowl fouling the waterways. There was all sorts of things. When white man came to New Zealand, we developed urban communities, we developed rural communities, we changed the face of this country. Spring forward 200 years, we have modern agriculture. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I would have said, yep, modern agriculture needs a kick up the bum. Absolutely. We needed to pull our socks up. We needed to do better. We needed to take responsibility for our actions. We have. Since we went dairying, New Zealand dairy farm, Fonterra dairy farmers alone have spent more than $1 billion making environmental changes. And those aren't corporations, those aren't big, huge industries, those are families. Every family has spent thousands and thousands of dollars.
Wow.
Fencing off waterways, upgrading their effluent systems, changing things because they're looking at their land and they're thinking, man, I want to be able to give this to my kids or sell this to another young person who really wants to grow food for New Zealand. Yeah. We want to leave this land better than what we had. So yeah, 15 years ago, needed to pull our socks up. We've been working on it, working really hard. Then they changed some more rules again. And we were like, okay, yeah, we can do this. We need to, limit our nitrogen use. We need to do nutrient budgets. We need to create farm plans. We need to be responsible again for sediment and nutrients that are potentially coming off of our property. We need to be responsible for our animal welfare. We need to look after brand New Zealand Inc., right? Because we export to 150 different countries. We have a reputation to uphold in 150 different countries. We have to meet the criteria of 150 countries, not just New Zealand's criteria, but the world's criteria.
Yeah.
So we're like, okay, yep, right. Let's get on with this. Let's do this. So what we did down here in Southland is we started creating what's called community catchment groups. So we looked at where the water went and we thought, okay, well, we've got some big rivers. We've got the Matera. We've got the Waiau. We've got the Oriti. See if I can name them all. We've got, who else have we got? We've got the Clutha. I think that one's in Southland as well. And there's one more. I can't think of it, but it is, yes. Anyway, my bad. So we've got 5 big catchments anyway. So within these catchments, we've got smaller rivers coming into them. So as farmers and as community members, we've decided, okay, well, let's take the people who live in each one of those catchments and let's create a group of people who care about those rivers and those tributaries and those smaller rivers. So we created 22 completely volunteer catchment groups to look after each of our little part of our river and look at it and say, okay, well, what's wrong with our part of the river? We can't do anything about Selwyn district, or we can't do anything about the Waikato, but what can we do about our own little patch? So we got together and we were like, okay, well, our problem, we've got sediment issues. Okay, well, let's do riparian planting. Let's give bigger buffers. Let's change, let's not plow that paddock. Let's plow that one instead. Let's do some things to actually genuinely improve our water quality. That's right. While all this was happening, our regional council, Environment Southland, they came up under the National Policy Statement for fresh water. They came up with the Southland Water and Land Plan, which when it first came out was a bit of a mess, to be honest. It was hard. So we were like, okay, we're not going to throw our hands up and say, no, we don't want it. Let's sit down and let's talk about this and let's see, okay, this part of the plan's really good. We can do this. This part, okay, we can't really do that because it's not practical. But we can do this. And we actually sort of sat around the table and we talked and we worked it out. And it wasn't perfect. But we had everybody around the table. We had fish and game, we had forest and bird, we had farmers, we had NGOs, we had communities, all sorts of different, we had everybody in our community sitting around the table. As you talked about the word grief, and that is, when I wrote that article, that is exactly what I was feeling, was sorrow, actually. Because for the last 5 years, we had been collaborating and communicating and having this really good discussion and really feeling as a community that we were getting somewhere, when this new legislation was released last month, which has basically come in over the top and completely smashed any hope of this situation that we have. Not only that, so you got to remember, we had to build up trust. We had to build up trust between council and farmers, between all these different NGOs. We had to get people actually sitting at the table talking. Now it feels like someone's just kind of thrown a bucket of paint on the Mona Lisa. It's quite soul destroying. Not only that, but the new rules that have come in, we cannot, as free range, grass-fed dairy farmers, we cannot meet those requirements.
So, Susan, tell me, what are these requirements that they're asking of you?
So I'll give you a couple of just some basic ones. It's a whole big, I mean, anyone who's been involved in policy understands that it's like you've got documents sort of that thick, and it's just, yeah. So I'll give you sort of the three big ones. The three big ones for us is that so in the wintertime down here in Southland, our grass doesn't grow, right? So we feed our stock on crops. And to someone who's used to seeing cows in nice green fields, that can be kind of confronting, because they're not nice green fields. They are crop paddocks, and we feed those cows a little bit of that crop every day. So behind the cows, once they've eaten that strip of food, it's dirt, it's bare soil. And the reason for that is because they've eaten all the food that is in that small section.
Yeah.
So in that crop paddock, on that bare soil, one criteria that is expected of us is that our cows cannot leave footprints deeper than 5 centimeters.
So just before you go on, because I know that there'll be a big, there'd be something more to do with this, but why are they not to leave?
So one of our problems down here in Southland is sediment runoff. So we have an estuary here just outside of Invercargill that has lost probably 20 hectares of its estuary, where we've had sediment running into this estuary, and it's created an area of about 20 hectares. I think it's about 20 or 30 hectares.
Yeah.
And that has been caused by multiple things over multiple years. Cropping, yep. Over the years, yep, definitely. Sediment runoff from cropping has definitely been part of the cause. What one needs to remember in Southland here is we have a lot of engineered waterways. So a lot of our rivers that I talked about before, a lot of them have been straightened. Now, when you straighten a river, you deepen a river, you usually run the risk of part of that river eroding. So those banks have the opportunity then, once you straighten it, you speed it up. Once you speed up water, it will chew out under those rivers, under the banks, and then you'll get bits of soil falling into it. We've got a block of land that has a small tributary to the Oriti running into it, and it's called the Makariwa River. And I just noticed we've had quite a lot of rain in the last few days, and I've noticed a chunk of soil, I would say probably twice the size of a big car, has fallen off into the river.
Wow.
So, yes. So it's not just winter grazing that's causing that sediment loss. You've got changes to the rivers. You've got construction. You've got forestry. Forestry is a big cause of sediment runoff as well. So when they say your cows can't pug, well, they call it pugging. I call it footprints because it is a footprint. When they say they can't go in deeper than 5 centimeters, that means that 5 centimeter space of soil is potentially all the soil that might move. That's sort of, I'm trying to think of the reason why they would do that, and that would potentially be the reason. There are things that we can do to stop that soil from moving. We can move that cow on, which we do anyway. We can put grass buffers, which catch a huge amount of soil at the edge of the paddock. We can stand her off. We can do all kinds of things. However, 5 centimeters on a rainy day, that's, I mean, you know, I'm sure there's lots of ladies in your group that have children that play rugby. You can imagine a rugby pitch in the middle of winter. How do those kids go into the mud?
Yeah, exactly. So where and how did they come up with these measurements? And nobody knows. Nobody knows.
I don't know. I'm somebody might know, but I don't know. I have no idea. 5 centimeters is, I suppose they probably figured they have to draw a line in the sand somewhere, but yeah, 5 centimeters.
Just chose here, pull it out of the tin. They actually do that in government, by the way. They pull out a thing out of the tin and then they all debate that. So pull it out of the hat sort of thing, and then we're going to call it 5 centimeters. What does that mean to you as a farmer? I mean, this is part of the thing that's causing everybody so much grief. What does it mean for your feeding your animals? What does it mean for winter feeding? How does it change? I know that it's financially it's going to change things for you. How does it change things for you as a farmer?
Oh, how does it change things? That's a really hard question because we don't know what to do.
Yeah. Wow.
We basically, if we put, we have to feed our animals over the winter. And my husband was joking the other day. He says, if I have to go to jail, I'm going to make sure my cows are fed first.
Aww.
And I said, well, and a lot of us, I mean, we have to make sure that our stock are fed, because I'm sorry, but they need to be fed. We're not going to not feed our stock.
And so sorry, just before you go on, okay, and you know, you guys love what you do. You love your animals. You know, this is a big, huge love job. You love this. You love these things. You know, and you know, like you said, you've got to feed these animals, and regardless of whether you're making money out of them, you want to feed your animals. What happens? How do they follow through and make sure that those regulations are being adhered to? Like, do they do sneaky little trips to each farm and check the measurements? How does that work?
We don't honestly know how they're actually going to roll this out. We've been, like I said, we've got a really good relationship with our regional council. In the past, it hasn't always been that great, but there's been a heck of a lot of work done by Environment Southland in recent years to really get some really good collaboration going with farmers in Southland here, and we've been working alongside each other, and like I said, like really trying to make positive steps towards improving everything, land, water, air, everything. We get audited by several different groups anyway. So if we want to supply Fonterra with milk, for example, we get inspections by Assure Quality New Zealand. We have to meet huge number of standards as far as environmental standards. They come in, they inspect to make sure that our waterways are fenced off, that we have those big grass buffers, that we have a effluent management plan. We also get inspected by our regional council. So there's another inspector that comes out, and they don't have to give any notice. The only time we know that they're coming is basically they are sitting in our driveway and on the phone saying, hi, we're here, we're coming to do an inspection, and you have to be ready at any time. So anyone that sort of thinks that all farmers can get away with anything all the time, we kind of get audited quite a bit. And I
was completely naive about farming in general. So all of this is such a huge eye opener. But I mean, I've heard, this is what I've just heard other women who are in farming and that talk about, that farmers are the hardest workers and some of the best people that they've ever met and they'll ever know, and that they just love what they do. And I just think, like, so do you feel picked on? Do you feel like this feels like you're being picked on, like when you're such hard workers and you're doing your damn best? Do you feel like
yeah, you do feel like somebody's got a vendetta? But I suppose I've been involved in quite a lot of other groups as well. Like I've been involved with catchment groups, and also with an organization called Dairy Environment Leaders, and also a dairy advisory group. And I suppose it's not that other farmers definitely feel picked on. They definitely like, why are they doing this to us? Why did it? I suppose I look at it like exactly what you said before. Our urban counterparts are completely naive generally to what we do. And they don't really understand the systems and processes and the decisions that you guys make in town, in, you know, in cities. You don't realize the huge effects that it will have on us. And
yeah.
I mean, you know, for example, you know, the Green Party at the moment, they've just released their environmental policies for the election. That's really scary for us. That's really, really, really scary for us, because not only would we not be able to do anything that we do, we would be taxed for it as well. So, but hey, I mean, like I said, apolitical, it's scary stuff. I personally don't feel like we're being picked on. I feel that it's more coming from a space of people just not understanding what we do. And part of what I do is I love having these conversations, and I love talking to people like yourself who ask genuine questions and who are open to actually listening to what we do. And I would advise any one of your beautiful ladies in your group, if you have any questions, jump on our page or talk to a farmer. Contact Dairy NZ, contact Beef and Land New Zealand if you want to talk to someone, if you want to go and visit a farm. Oh my God, like that would be nirvana if we could get people coming out and actually seeing what we do, instead of sort of, you know, Googling whatever they Google and coming up with all these really weird videos that don't even apply to New Zealand agriculture. We're really lucky here. We've got such a great place to live, and we've got such a great population. It's yeah. So
I feel a little bit embarrassed, because like I said to you, I came in here without a list of questions, because really I just wanted to get to the bottom of what you wrote, you know, and coming up to the elections, I want to know what's going on for people, and how are different policies and how is different legislation affecting real New Zealanders. So I wanted to have that conversation unscripted. I really wanted to just ask some pretty naive questions, and I've had some really good answers. What I want to know is, if you can't, it sounds to me like it's going to be darn near impossible for you to have, you know, your cows not put a hoof print, you know, bigger than 5 centimeters. It's going to be darn near impossible. What are they going to do if you can't adhere to that? What does that mean? Does that mean they're going to say, right, that's it, you don't adhere to the regulations, you can no longer sell your milk? Is that how it's going to be?
Well, in the past, when we haven't been able to meet so what they're expecting is the regional councils to enforce these rules. In the past, when farmers have breached their resource consent, there's usually been infringement notices. So you get a fine, basically. The first fine is usually 4 figures. So the first fine, usually 4 figures. When we get these inspections, which we get reasonably regularly, they charge us for them to come out to inspect us, right? So there's that as well. We also have to pay administration fees to get these resource consents, and we have to meet conditions of these resource consents and provide them with information. Every time we send them information, we get charged for them to process our information. If you continue to breach your resource consent, then the fine usually jumps to 5 figures. You know, and that's when you read those headlines in the Herald or in wherever, Radio NZ or whatever, where, you know, farmer gets fined $60,000 for breaching their resource consent. It's probably the second or third time that his effluent system's busted or something like that. So I would envisage that if we are unable to meet the conditions of this particular resource consent, well, to get a resource consent for this, oftentimes a lot of farmers aren't equipped to be able to fill out the paperwork for this, so they hire a consultant. Usually that's probably about 10 grand for somebody like Opus to come in and do the paperwork for you.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's onerous, it's expensive, and they charge like wounded buffaloes, basically.
So I mean, see, I feel like I'm living such a simple life now in comparison to you. And I feel really like this, I feel stressed listening to this. Like, this makes me think, oh, Oh God, I can't even imagine how you could, you'd have to come up with $1,000 here and then $10,000 there, and it's just costs everywhere. You've got to love what you do. You've got to love what you do to continue in this community and this job and this career. You've got to love what you do. So what? Yeah. So what? If you can't adhere to this, and it sounds really tricky, really hard. I've heard another farmer who's actually in our group, she said that it sounds like she's actually just working as a manager for a farm, but she said it sounds like, the farmers might have to end up building big concrete, what do you call them? Like
barns. Yep.
Barns, concrete barns for your cows during the winter to prevent that problem of the ground pugging or footprints, so is that something that might have to happen? And then that would be several hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of work, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so that's again a really scary alternative. So New Zealand has this wonderful little niche in the markets in the world because most of our milk, actually I would say 99% of our milk, is grass-fed, free range. Mm-hmm. If we start putting our cows into barns, we will be the same as every other country in the world. So we would likely lose our market advantage. And we do have a market advantage. I know people within New Zealand don't sort of think about that. And they don't realize that these grass-fed pasture-based dairying, they don't realize it, but it contributes a heck of a lot to the New Zealand economy. And it's also way, 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 way better for the environment. I mean, I'm from Canada originally, and I grew up on a dairy farm in Canada. So I'm in a pretty good position to compare the two systems. My parents, they dairy farmed in Canada. And before that, they've dairy farmed in Belgium for the previous 400 years sort of thing. So long line of dairy cows. But in Canada, so the cows in Canada, they're in these what they call freestall barns. Yep, huge concrete structures. You bring all the feed to the cow. Per kilo of protein produced, our cows, if we shipped a liter of milk to Canada, we would still be probably 2 to 3 times more environmentally efficient per kilo of protein than what a locally produced dairy farmer in Canada would produce that milk for. Simply because they grow the feed, they harvest the feed, they bring the feed to the cow eats the feed, produces lots of milk, lots and lots of milk. Then she poos. All that poo has to be taken out, again, using diesel engines. The milk has to be transported to a factory. The factory then takes it to a distribution center. Distribution center takes it to a supermarket, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. New Zealand, cow goes to the paddock, eats the grass, walks to the shed herself, gets milked, goes into like in our situation, a Fonterra tanker, to the factory, to the supermarket shelf. So the environmental footprint is way, way, way lower. The frightening thing about barns too is our cows are the wrong shape for a barn. And when I say the wrong shape, so North American cows are huge. They weigh nearly a ton, right? So those animals are specifically bred and have been specifically bred for probably 100 years, 150 years to stand on concrete structures. So their legs are very straight. They are massive animals designed to eat a huge amount of concentrated feed. New Zealand cows are much, much smaller. They've got a suspension system, effectively, for lack of which they're bred to walk long distances. They're bred to get in calf every 12 months. They're bred to convert grass to milk really, really, really efficiently. So putting those animals, sticking them into a concrete structure, into a barn, it's, if you can imagine standing on a frozen lake or a frozen surface, you can imagine what your legs do. You sort of tense up and you slip and it's not comfortable for you to stand. So it's not really, our cows aren't really suited to standing on concrete for long periods of time.
They're going to get hurt, they're going to get stressed, and it's going to be environmentally not very friendly anyhow.
Not for us.
So it's a bit of a contraindication, really. I mean, where it's a like they're doing this to save the waterways, and they're creating all of this other environmental mess.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
The other thing is that barn, you said hundreds of thousands of dollars. If we were to build a barn for our animals, it would cost somewhere in the way of 2.2 to 2.3 million dollars.
Oh, okay. So just like a house in Auckland kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
But the troubling thing is, so you've spent an extra $2-3 million on this barn. Your land value, if you were to then sell your land, doesn't increase.
Oh, sickening. Absolutely sickening.
To tack that on to the price of your farm if you were to sell it, because it doesn't affect the land value. So you spent $2 million for no gain at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just not somewhere that I think we want to go.
So Suzanne, you don't want to go there, but yet here we are, because as you said, they've put the law through, and they expect to be rolling it out by October 2021. Is that right?
Something like that. Yep.
Yeah. And so in the meantime, between when they put the law in place and then, what can happen to reverse that? Is there any way that can be repealed, I suppose?
Well, we're trying really hard, and we're trying to have some really good sit-down conversations with council, and at a higher level, we're trying to sit down with people in Wellington and say, we can't do this. The 5 centimeter pugging footprint rule, that's one of them. The other one is you can't cultivate land on a more than a 10-degree slope. So 10-degree slope, so that's probably, I'm guessing, roughly sort of there.
And that's the runoff thing as well. It's all about things going into the water. Yeah. And so some urban bigwigs in government have sat down at their little round table and had their coffee cups and cups of tea and scones, and they've decided for the farmers what they think needs to be set in place in order to save the waterways. Is that as real as it sounds? Like, is that how it is, or is there something a little bit more deep and meaningful that's gone into it? Like, have any farmers been in consultation?
Well, we've tried to consult, and that's been the really frustrating part, is we have tried to consult. However, we were locked out of that process. When submissions were asked for, there were over 17,000 submissions sent in. When the government said, hey, what do you think? Only 2,000 of those 17,000 submissions were read.
Yeah.
And the rest, and my understanding is the rest were shelved.
So did this happen during the first lockdown?
No, this was last year.
Oh, so this happened before all of that. So I thought, there was a lot of legislation that was whipped through during the lockdown, and I thought that was a little bit crazy and bizarre. But I mean, this stuff, we had time for consultation back then. They could have read all the submissions. They could have, they had the time. They didn't have a big crisis on their hands. They could
have invited us in and talked to us. They could
have farmers. Yeah.
They could actually talk to us, and we were there. We were saying, hey, look, and the groups that I'm involved in, we're not the pitchfork wielding rednecks. We really do try to sit down and have rational conversations and actually try to find a way forward. We definitely want to make things better for all New Zealanders. We don't want to sort of dig our toes in and say, no, we're not going to do this. And we want to get a good result for everybody, because at the end of the day, we're all in this place together, and we got to look after each other.
Exactly. And actually that leads on to my next thought, that will turn into a question, and that is, if you can't look after your animals, and you can't adhere to these regulations, and therefore, you're getting these fines and these bills or whatever happens, how does that affect, what's the flow-on effect, the ripple effect to that for the rest of New Zealand? And in a time where our economy is absolutely poked beyond belief, how does this help us economy-wise? What is it going to do to us as New Zealand farming community, should I say, is the biggest community and a biggest part of our economy. What happens to us if you can't adhere to their rules?
Yeah, there's so much we don't know about how this is going to play out. And that's really frustrating, because I know I'd love to be able to give you some certainty and say, right, this is what's going to happen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We basically, as I said in my article, we've got to figure it out. You know, I haven't figured it out yet, but we've got to figure it out. As far as what it means for the rest of New Zealand, the rural sector, the rural community has already got the highest mental health and suicide rate in New Zealand of any other sector. This isn't probably going to help. You know, there are lots of people, you know, we have got absolutely wonderful communities. We've got amazing people that work in these communities. We also have some pretty high stress levels. I shudder to think of what will eventuate from that. I'm normally a really, really positive person, and I love tooting everyone else's horn and, you know, pat on the back and all that sort of stuff. And I tend to kind of say, right, you know, we can't give up. Let's smash it out. Let's do what we can to figure this out. I'm kind of at a loss at the moment. The moment, which is frustrating, because normally I'm kind of a yeah, let's smash this out and figure it out, and we'll get through this, and, you know, pat on the back and shot in the arm, and yeah, but we will get there. We will work it out. I just don't know how the chips are going to fall just yet. But what we would really, really, really appreciate is if urban New Zealand actually just give us a shout out. You know, I mean, like I said, I'm not worried. I'll be all right. But you know, take an interest in our rural communities, take an interest in our rural sectors. You know, ask really good questions. If you want to know something or you're not clear on something, ask us. You know, the more you guys know, the more informed that you'll be, and then you can help us make decisions, or help our government make decisions that aren't going to hamstring us, because at the moment we're pretty hamstrung.
I honestly don't think, because, you know, even me, for example, I honestly just don't think, I think it's a case of you don't know what you don't know. And until it actually directly affects your own life, so, you know, you can't have your coffee and your milk, you know, until it directly affects you because there's no milk on the shelf anymore, or, you know, whatever, it's got to really hurt you to sometimes for you to try and think from someone else's perspective. And, you know, like this whole lockdown and all of these policies and all of this legislation, all of this stuff that's being pushed through, and I'm just watching it like, oh, it's like this one's coming, that one's coming, this one, and I'm like, wait, how is this all happening? How are people not being consulted? Why don't we know? Because we're just not having enough conversations with each other. It's almost like we're in our own little insular little packages all over New Zealand, and we need to unite so that we can stick together. I think, you know, I think we need to be fighting together in unity, because like you said, it's all of New Zealand who get affected. If the farming community are affected, we're all affected. And I think people really need to know what that's going to look like and how that's going to hurt them, because inevitably it will. So gosh, I don't know, I really feel for you. I don't really even know what to say. I think, you know, sometimes I think my level of stress, I'm a single mum of 4, and I think that level of stress is enough, but I would still not trade off with a farmer because that would just do my head in.
Yeah, you talked about it before, and it actually got me thinking about, you know, not having milk for your cup of tea or milk for your coffee and stuff. What potentially could happen with this is that your dairy products, but also not just dairy, but because this is a land issue, so your fruit and veg, your dairy, your beef, your pork, pork that's already buggered, that's been imported from God knows where. Your food, basically, it probably won't disappear, but it'll probably get really expensive. You know, people were cringing when, you know, cheese got to sort of $20 for a 1 kg block. That's kind of nothing. The other thing that could affect this, so of course this is a national policy statement on fresh water, is that your rates in your cities are likely to go absolutely through the roof, because although you sort of flush the toilet and you put water down the sink and down the drain, and your washing machine, you know, it empties down the drain, etc., etc. That water goes through sewage treatment plants. Those sewage treatment plants, there is not a single sewage treatment plant in New Zealand that has met its resource consents consistently over the last decades.
Wow.
So
they're going to make them fix those, and then they're going to put the rates up, and everybody's going to be affected. So we're going to have no food, and, and we can't flush the darn toilet. We're going to have to all go and poop on a concrete brick down in somebody's farm. Oh, honestly, it just, I mean, the thing is, I feel like people just don't put the whole story together. All these little things that are happening all over New Zealand, to all different genres all over New Zealand, you know, we're hurting each other if we don't stay connected. You know, we need unity, and we need to fight this fight together. Okay, I don't really, I mean, we could just go on and on and on. Honestly, I could just listen and listen. I think it's just such an amazing story, and you're such a wealth of information. But what message would you send to New Zealand, to the people of New Zealand? What can we do? What's a practical thing that we can do to help the farmers?
Oh, what you can do to help the farmers. Number one, we are not trying to ruin New Zealand.
Yeah.
We get a big stick waved over our head continuously saying that we're horrible people, and that, you know, that we are awful to our animals, and that we're terrible for the environment, and all these sorts of things. There are bad apples in every group. You know, there are bad teachers, there are bad policemen, there are bad farmers. I would say in every farmer that I know personally are pretty much as crazy about farming as what I am. You know, they really are passionate about what they do. It's a privilege to be able to grow food and to be able to do what we do every day, to live where we live, to look out our office window. You know, we're really lucky to be able to do that. Yes, it's got pressure that you wouldn't believe, and it is hard work. But man, I mean, we feed the world. You know,
you do.
We feed people. What greater? I mean, you know how proud a chef is of what they do. They prepare the food. Well, we grow the food that they prepare, and we're really, really proud of that, because we know that when our milk leaves our property, or when our beef leaves the property, we know that that animal has had the best life that it could have. And I mean, I'm sorry, vegans and vegetarians, but when you're dead, you don't know you're dead. You know, and and while they're alive, we try to treat them that they're happy animals, and that they have a really good life. The rest of New Zealand, read your labels, buy New Zealand produce, especially, I mean, for our pig farming counterparts. You're going to pay a lot more for New Zealand pork. You're going to pay a lot more for New Zealand lamb. You're going to pay a lot more for New Zealand produce. But please support your local farmers. Get interested. You know, learn where your food comes from. Learn about the systems and processes. And if you're not sure, you're more than welcome to jump on our page or on any farming page. And ask questions. You know, we're just people. We're just normal families, normal communities like everyone else. You know, as Natalia, you saw, we trim tails, and we give our cows haircuts and toenail and pedicures as well. So
what is it? Back sacks and cracks.
Oh,
okay, we don't do that. Oh, no, it's so lovely. I'm going to link Bristol Grove Dairies to this live stream once we're off, and hopefully a few of our followers go and at least check it out and see what you're all about. And I don't know, the conversation's been awesome and eye-opening, and I don't know, like I would love to see some snippets of information like what we've talked about today, even on your Facebook page. I think if people go and visit your Facebook page and they do, you know, see the cows and they see the farms, and that's all really amazing. But if they heard little pieces of information like this, you know, just little snippets, little bite-sized sound bites, just to say, you know, what's going on in the industry, how we can help you, that kind of thing, I think would really be awesome on your pages. But yeah, just my suggestion, because I mean, people don't really know what they don't know, and I've learned a lot tonight. And yeah, I just think you're freaking amazing, you lot. You're freaking amazing. Thanks so much for coming and having a chat with me, and wishing you all obviously the very, very best. And I'm going to keep my finger on the pulse with regard to what happens with the farming industry, and I might even have a few little toots of my own down to Wellington to put my point across as well. Thanks so much for coming and chatting with us tonight.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome.